My name is Blake Savage, and I suffered a spinal cord injury in January, and that's why I'm here today. My life before the injury was very active and athletic, always doing things with family that was very active, and that's kind of what led to my accident.
He was traveling for work with his guys. You know, with long distance, things had been hard, not seeing each other a ton, and he had sat me down that night before and said, we're gonna start spending more time together. And that was Sunday night. Monday morning being the accident.
I was in Mesquite, Nevada, and I was just riding with a friend of mine. Pretty standard day, and riding on a track that I've rode before. It was just a simple mistake. I had a crash. Led to the bike landing right on top of me. Fractured my C5 and 6 vertebrae. From the past, I'm very used to crashing and hitting the ground. I just remember trying to sit up, and yeah, I went to touch my legs, and it was nothing there. It was like tapping your hand on this table.
His sister called me and let me know he was in an accident.
It's always a concern with riding motorcycles, but you never actually think it's gonna happen to you.
I was grateful he was alive, because things can always be much worse. But I think I went into quite a bit of shock.
First place I went was the Mesquite Hospital. I was there for a few hours, and then I got transported here in St. George.
So Dixie Regional Medical Center is a level 2 trauma center, meaning we take just about anything traumatic from the area and surrounding areas.
What I could tell had happened from the MRI is that he had snapped his neck significantly, torn ligaments, broke some bones, dinged the spinal cord, and then it kind of come back partially.
Someone with that level of spinal cord injury will typically be wheelchair bound in a power wheelchair. A lot of times someone with that level of injury will be needing a mechanical lift.
I had walked in the hospital room and I could just see like a blank stare in his face. I don't think it had fully hit him. He didn't freak out, he didn't cry, which is typical Blake. He knows how to handle stressful situations, which is also something I love about him.
To be square, his attitude was amazing. You know, we see a lot of crazy stuff in the ER, and he was upbeat, he was positive.
I had surgery the next day, and then I was there for, I believe, 2 days before I got moved to the neuro rehab.
His deficits were very profound when he first came to us. There was very little movement in his arms and no movement in his trunk, and then absolutely no movement in his lower extremities.
He was appropriate for a neurospecialty rehab where he gets, 3-4 hours of therapy or more a day.
And that's where spinal cord injury recovery really comes in, is in the rehab. But our job is to stabilize him, get him through the first few weeks, and then turn him over to Rusty and Brendan and say, hey, go for it. Oh.
You want a little rest? of course, he had his low points along the way, and he had his moments where he felt discouraged, but he never let it stop him from doing the things that he needed to work on to develop the really impressive skills that he developed throughout his stay with us and what he continues to develop on his own.
You know, in the hospital, you have someone kind of tending to your every need. The hospital here in St. George is phenomenal. They became family, and we still go back and visit them. And then settling into real life things is when I think he realized how real this is going to be for a little bit.
Some of the most difficult, things to take in is not just the, knowing that you don't have the use of your legs currently anymore, but you have a whole lot of other things you have to deal with, like, showering is way more difficult, going to the bathroom is way more difficult, getting in and out of bed, everything like that.
And then that's where they come into outpatient services, where they actually get in a car and they come here a couple times a week for therapy. So. And so when someone comes into outpatient and they're just coming to you just for a couple of days a week, it's almost like a piano lesson. When you come in, the teacher is giving a lesson, but what's the expectation is for you to be able to go home and to be able to practice those things. And if you're not practicing, you shouldn't go back to the piano teacher and say, hey, why am I getting better at the piano? It's the same thing with this as well. It's very, very important on the outpatient setting that we're giving home programs for that individual to be able to practice those things so that they're learning and improving between the therapy sessions, and so you can help maximize your potential.
That's one thing I can honestly say that I've been proud of myself about is how consistent I've been with my therapy. I make sure I do some every single day, whether it's with Steve or Richard or just doing my own home therapy. Sometimes you feel defeated if you're not making any progress. You get discouraged and you don't want to do the therapy, but when you can't see the progress coming is when it's most important.
It's one thing to do PT at home, but I don't think we could have picked two better therapists to work with Blake. They're some of his best friends now, actually. I think just see them and be able to talk to them is a big deal for him.
The longer you can stay with it, the better it gets. You just never know if the next time you show up to therapy, if it's going to be your best day yet.
So what we're going to do today, Blake, is get out into that water. We'll climb onto that SUP. We'll start out with you sitting, paddle around the lake a few times, and then try coming off of the SUP and then climbing back into it.
Okay, sounds good.
It's generally thought that the greatest amount of recovery for anyone with a neurological injury is going to happen within the first 3 months of the injury. And Blake has proven that wrong. So that's what is so wonderful about Blake is he's wanting to build. He keeps building those neural pathways, those movement patterns, and I think that's spilling over into the lower extremities and showing movement that maybe is possible down the road and maybe the ability to walk. I mean, that still remains to be seen. The work Blake and I have continued with is really experimental, and it's really turning into a collaboration. Maybe even think of it as research and development. So he's really now a partner with me, not a patient. And him and I are trying to figure out how do you get someone with a spinal cord injury to move their legs. We're trying to take them to levels that most people would just say, well, you're not going to get there. Greg, you seeing this?
That's right.
Anyone that knows Blake knows that if he's got a goal, it's going to be achieved no matter what, no matter the hours, the time he puts into it, it's going to happen.
It is a huge team hospital effort to just take care of one person like Blake. And man, Blake's a champion, right? I mean, what a stud for how he's dealing with this. So I think it's really great.